woman behind the register at Dawson's Hardware grabbed my arm so hard I almost dropped the bag of mulch I was carrying. She whispered that the old man in aisle 7 was crying, just standing there by the power tools, staring at my name tag from across the store. I didn't understand what she meant. I set the mulch down and looked. Sure enough, there was a man in an expensive camel overcoat, leaning on a polished black cane, tears running openly down his face, his eyes locked on me. I thought he was confused, maybe having a medical episode. I walked over to ask if he needed help. He grabbed my wrist before I could even speak. His hand was bony but surprisingly strong. He asked me, his voice shaking, if my last name was really Kimball. I looked down at my name tag. It said Clarence Kimball. Assiscoerance. Kimball. Assiscoerance. Kimball. Assiscoerant. I told him yes, that was my name. He closed his eyes and the tears came harder. He said he had been searching for a Kimball for over 50 years. He asked me if I knew a man named Virgil. And right there, in aisle 7 of a hardware store where I earned $9.60 an hour, the world tilted sideways. Virgil Kimball was my father. He died in 1991 of emphysema, coughing his last breath in a VA hospital bed while I held his hand. I told the old man that, and he lowered his head and wept like a child. He said my father had saved his life. He said he owed my father everything. And then he said something that made no sense at all. He said there was money. A lot of money. Money that had been waiting for a Kimball for 53 years. But to understand what happened next, and why it nearly broke me in half, you need to know how I ended up working in a hardware store at 67 years old with $12 in my checking account and no place to call home. My wife Inez and I were married for 41 years. She was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, who kept a jar of butterscotch candies on the kitchen counter because our grandkids liked them. Every Sunday morning she made biscuits from scratch, not from a can, from scratch. Flour on her nose, butter under her fingernails. That kitchen smelled like heaven. She hummed while she cooked. Always the same song, some old hymn her grandmother taught her. I never learned the name of it. I wish I had. Pancreatic cancer. The doctor said it like he was reading a weather report. 3 to 6 months. She lasted 4. Those 4 months were the hardest and most precious of my life. I bathed her. I fed her. I slept in a chair next to her bed because she was afraid of dying alone in the dark. She went on a Tuesday in September, just before dawn. I was holding her hand. She squeezed once, very softly, and then she was gone. The house went quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. My sons came for the funeral. Randall, the older one, flew in from Denver. Keith drove up from Charlotte. They wore nice suits and said the right things. People told me what good boys I had raised. I believed it then. 3 weeks after we buried Inez, Randall called. Not to check on me. He called about the house. He said he'd been looking into it. And the house was in Inez's name only. Some paperwork thing from decades ago that I never thought twice about. He said that legally, the house was now part of her estate, and since there was no will specifying otherwise, it would be split between him and Keith as her children. I told him that was my home, that I had lived there for 36 years, that I had painted every wall, fixed every leaky pipe, replaced the roof twice with my own hands. He said he understood, but that Keith needed money for his kids' college, and he himself was going through a divorce, and his lawyer fees were bleeding him dry. He said they were going to sell the house and split the proceeds. I asked him where I was supposed to go. There was silence on the line. Then he said I could probably find a senior living place that took Social Security. My Social Security check was $518 a month. I told him that. He said he'd look into some options for me. He never did. Keith was even worse. When I called him crying, asking how they could do this, he told me not to be dramatic. He said plenty of people my age lived in studio apartments. He said I should be grateful they weren't asking me to pay them back for the funeral costs. Grateful? My own son told me to be grateful. They sold the house in 6 weeks. Split $92,000 between them. They gave me nothing. Not a penny. Randall said I could take my personal belongings and whatever furniture would fit in a small space. I packed 2 suitcases and a box of photo albums. Everything else, 41 years of life with Inez, the Sunday dishes, her collection of ceramic birds, the kitchen table where we ate 10,000 meals together, all of it went to a estate sale company. I heard they made an extra $6,000 from our things. I never saw a cent of that either. I found a room in a boarding house on the east side of town. $340 a month. The room had a single bed, a dresser with one broken drawer, and a window that looked out onto a parking lot. The bathroom was down the hall, shared with 4 other tenants. The man in the room next to mine played talk radio at full volume until 2 in the morning. The ceiling had a brown water stain shaped like the state of Florida. I stared at it every night. I had $178 left each month after rent. I ate rice. I ate canned tuna. I ate day-old bread from the bakery outlet that sold it for $1 a loaf. I lost weight fast. My pants started hanging off me. I caught a glimpse of myself in a store window one day and didn't recognize the man looking back. He was gaunt, gray, hollowed out. 2 months into this life, I walked into Dawson's Hardware and asked if they were hiring. The manager, a young guy probably 35, looked at me and asked if I had retail experience. I told him I'd spent 40 years as an electrician before I retired. He hired me on the spot. $9.60 an hour, 25 hours a week. My job was stocking shelves, carrying bags to customers' cars, and sweeping the floors at closing. My body screamed. My knees swelled every night. My lower back burned so bad some mornings I couldn't straighten up for 10 minutes. I stood on concrete floors for 5-6 hours straight. By the time I got back to my room, I could barely pull off my shoes. But I needed the money. Every shift was another $40, $50. Without it, I'd be eating nothing at all. The worst part wasn't the pain. The worst part wasn't the invisibility. Customers looked right through me. I was just the old man carrying their bags. Nobody saw me. Nobody knew I had once owned a home, raised a family, wired entire buildings, held my dying wife in my arms. I was nobody. 5 months passed. 5 months of silence from my sons. No calls, no texts, not on Thanksgiving, not on Christmas, not on Inez's birthday. That one broke me. December 8th. The first birthday of hers I had ever spent without calling someone to celebrate with. I sat in my room that night and ate a can of soup and looked at a photograph of her from our 25th anniversary. She was laughing in it, her head thrown back, her eyes crinkled. I talked to her picture like she could hear me. I told her I was sorry. I told her I didn't understand how this happened. I didn't consider ending things. I want to be clear about that. But I stopped caring whether tomorrow came. There is a difference, and it is a thin one. Then came that Thursday in February. A slow afternoon at Dawson's. Maybe 6 customers in the whole store. I was restocking drill bits in aisle 7 when the front door chimed. I glanced up and saw the old man walk in. Tall, thin, very well dressed, camel overcoat, silk scarf, shoes polished to a mirror shine. He walked with a cane, but he carried himself like someone used to being in charge. His hair was solid white, slicked neatly to one side. He had to be at least 85. He wandered through the aisles like he was looking for something specific. Then he turned the corner into my aisle and stopped dead. He was staring at my chest, at my name tag. His face went completely white. His mouth opened. His hand tightened on the cane so hard, his knuckles turned yellow. I watched the color drain from him, and I genuinely thought he was about to collapse. That's when the tears started. And that's when he grabbed my wrist and asked about Virgil. After I confirmed that Virgil Kimball was my father, the old man steadied himself against the shelving unit and took several deep breaths. He told me his name was Murray Ashworth. He asked me if I could leave work, said it was urgent, said it was about something that would change my life. I almost said no. I'm not a trusting person, not anymore, but there was something in his eyes, something raw and desperate and honest, that made me go find my manager and tell him I needed to leave early. Murray had a car waiting outside, a black sedan with a driver. We drove downtown to a law office on the 14th floor of a glass building. Murray didn't say much during the ride. He just kept looking at me and shaking his head, muttering that he couldn't believe it, that after all these years, it was a hardware store. In the office, he sat me down across from a mahogany desk and told me the story. In 1971, Murray Ashworth was 32 years old and broke. Completely broke. He'd just been fired from a freight company. He had a wife, 2 baby girls, and rent, due in 11 days. He was sitting at a bar on a Wednesday night, drinking the last beer he could afford, when my father sat down next to him. They were strangers. Virgil ordered a whiskey, and they started talking. Murray told him everything, the job loss, the family, the desperation. He said he had an idea for a construction supply business, but no money and no credit. Nobody would give him a dime. My father listened. Then, according to Murray, he did something insane. He told Murray he had savings, not much, $12,000. Everything he had earned in 14 years as a carpenter saved dollar by dollar. He said he believed Murray could make something of the business idea and offered him the money. All of it. No contract, no lawyers. Just a handshake and a promise. Murray said he was stunned. He asked Virgil why. Why would you give your life savings to a stranger in a bar? My father apparently said that he had a feeling about him. That sometimes you meet a person and you just know. The agreement was simple. Murray would use the money to start the business. Once it was profitable, Virgil would be a partner, 20%. They shook hands. Murray took that $12,000 and built Ashworth Building Materials. The first year was brutal. The second year they broke even. The third year, they turned a profit. By 1980, Ashworth Building Materials had 4 locations across 3 states. By 1990, they had 12. By the time Murray semi-retired in 2005, the company was worth tens of millions. But here's the thing. After my father gave Murray that money in 1971, he disappeared. Not intentionally. My family moved a lot when I was a kid. We went from that town to another city, then to the state where I grew up. My father never had a permanent phone number. This was the 70s. No internet, no cell phones. Murray tried to find him. He hired people. He searched records. But Virgil Kimball was a common enough type of name, and my father wasn't the kind of man who left a trail. He didn't have credit cards. He didn't own property in his name. He worked cash jobs for years after we moved. Murray never found him, but he never forgot. He set aside 20% of his company in a trust. Every year the shares grew. Every year Murray told his lawyers to keep searching for a Virgil Kimball or any descendant of Virgil Kimball or match the description. A carpenter, originally from that town, would have been in his mid-30s in 1971. For 53 years, that trust sat there, growing. Murray said he had made a promise, and he intended to keep it even if it took the rest of his life. He said he had recently been diagnosed with something serious. He didn't tell me what. That's why he was at the hospital that day. And that's why, when he walked into a hardware store to buy a simple bracket for a shelf in his home office, and he saw the name Kimball on a name tag, he almost had a heart attack. But he needed to be sure. So his lawyers ran a verification. They cross-referenced my father's records, birth certificate, military service, marriage license, places of residence, social security number. Within 72 hours, they confirmed it. I was the son of Virgil Kimball, the man who had given Murray Ashworth $12,000 in a bar in 1971. Murray sat across from me in that law office and slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a document showing the current value of the trust that held 20% of Ashworth Building Materials, $27 million. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The numbers on that page blurred because my eyes were full of tears. My father, who died coughing in a VA hospital, who never owned a home, who wore the same 2 pairs of work boots until the soles fell apart, had unknowingly created a fortune through a single act of trust in a stranger. Murray was crying too. He said he was sorry. Sorry it took so long. Sorry my father died without knowing. He said he dreamed of this moment for decades, of sitting across from a Kimball and finally keeping his word. The legal process took about 3 weeks. Murray's lawyers handled everything. On a Wednesday morning, I signed papers in that same office, and the trust was transferred to my name. I remember walking out of the building into the sunlight and standing on the sidewalk, unable to move. People streamed past me on both sides. Horns honked. The city hummed. The city hummed, and I just stood there, a 67-year-old man in a hardware store vest, holding a folder worth $27 million, thinking about my father. I moved out of the boarding house the next day. I found a clean, bright apartment near the park, the kind with big windows and a kitchen where I could actually cook. I went to a grocery store and bought real food for the first time in months. Steak, fresh vegetables, good coffee. I stood in the coffee aisle for 10 minutes just smelling different bags, because Inez used to do that. She'd hold them up to her nose and close her eyes. I picked the one I thought she'd choose. That first night in the new apartment, I made coffee and sat by the window and watched the streetlights come on. I talked to Inez again like I always did. I told her about the money. I told her about the money. I told her about her husband, the crazy man who gave his life savings to a stranger because he had a feeling. Then I called my sons. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I still had hope. Maybe some stupid, stubborn part of me believed that underneath everything, they loved me, that the money and the stress and the grief had temporarily broken something that could be repaired. Randall picked up on the second ring. I could hear the surprise in his voice. He hadn't expected to hear from me. He asked how I was doing, and his voice had that careful politeness you use with people you feel guilty about, but not guilty enough to actually do anything. I told him I was fine. I asked if he and Keith could meet me for dinner the following Saturday. Somewhere nice. My treat. He hesitated, then agreed. We met at a steakhouse downtown. Both of them arrived together, which told me they'd spoken beforehand. Probably strategized. They were curious, I could tell. They kept glancing at each other. We ordered drinks. We made small talk. Keith asked about my health. Randall asked about the weather. Nobody asked where I was living. Nobody asked how I had been surviving for the past 5 months. Nobody apologized for anything. After the food arrived, I told them about Murray Ashworth, about the bar in 1971, about their grandfather Virgil giving away everything, about the 53 years of searching, about the trust. When I said the number, $27 million, the restaurant might as well have gone silent. Keith put down his fork. Randall leaned forward so hard his tie almost dipped into his soup. Their eyes changed. I watched it happen in real time. Something clicked behind their pupils, some calculation, some rearrangement of who I was to them. Keith spoke first. He said that was incredible. He said it was a blessing for the whole family. The whole family. He said we should sit down together with a financial advisor, plan it out, make sure it was protected and managed properly. He said he knew a guy. Randall jumped in. He said he was so happy for me that he always knew something good would come my way, that I deserved it after everything. He said we should celebrate. He flagged down the waiter and ordered a bottle of champagne. I sat there and watched them transform. 5 months of complete silence. 5 months of me eating canned tuna in a room that smelled like mildew. 5 months of not a single phone call. Not on Thanksgiving, not on Christmas, not on their mother's birthday. And now here they were, ordering champagne and talking about financial advisors and using words like family and blessing and together. I let them talk for a while. I let them spin their plans. Then I raised my hand, and they went quiet. I told them that when they sold the house out from under me, I understood. When they told me to find a place on $500 a month, I understood. When they didn't call on Thanksgiving, I understood. When they didn't call on Thanksgiving, I understood. When they didn't call on Christmas, I understood. When December 8th came and went, the first birthday of their mother without her, and neither of them called to share that grief with me, I understood something final. I told them I understood that I was alone. I said that for 5 months, I stocked shelves and carried bags and swept floors, that my knees swelled every night, that I ate rice and bread and lost 30 pounds, that I stared at a water stain on a ceiling and talked to a photograph of their mother because she was the only person left who cared whether I existed. And that, in all of that, the only person who showed up for me was a stranger. A man I had never met, a man who kept a promise to my dead father for 53 years. A stranger had more loyalty to me than my own sons. Keith started to say something. His voice cracked. He said he was sorry, that things had been hard for everyone, that he didn't realize how bad it was. I asked him what he thought was going to happen when a 67-year-old man with $500 a month got thrown out of his own house. I asked him if he thought it was going to be fine. He didn't answer. Randall tried a different angle. He got emotional. His eyes watered. He said he knew they had messed up, that there was no excuse, that he thought about me all the time, but didn't know what to say. He said we were still family, and that family could heal. I told him I wanted to believe that. God knows I did. But I told them both that I had learned something in those 5 months. I had learned the difference between words and actions. Words were easy. Words could be manufactured on the spot, like champagne, ordered the second you hear a number with 7 zeros. Actions were the truth, and their actions for 5 months told me exactly who I was to them. I told them they would not see any of this money. Not now, maybe not ever. I told them the money was my inheritance from my father, a man who would have given his last dollar to a stranger, but who never would have abandoned his own blood. I said I intended to honor what that money represented. The masks came off. Randall's sadness hardened into something ugly. He said I was being vindictive. He said they had a legal right to contest the trust as family members. He said he'd already been through 1 divorce and knew how courts worked. I stayed calm. I told him my lawyers had already anticipated that, and that the trust was bulletproof. It was made out to me, specifically as the verified descendant. They could spend $100,000 on attorneys if they wanted. They would lose. Keith tried the soft approach one more time. He said he didn't care about money. He said he didn't care about money. He said he just wanted his dad back. He said he missed me. I wanted it to be true. I ached for it to be true. But I had replayed December 8th in my mind 1,000 times. Inez's birthday. I had sat alone with a can of soup and a photograph. Neither of them called. That wasn't an oversight. That was a choice. I stood up. I reached for my wallet and put $300 bills on the table. I told them the door wasn't locked forever. I told them if they ever showed me with their actions, not their words, that they understood what they had done, then maybe we could begin to rebuild something, but it would have to be real, not because of money, not because of guilt, because they actually wanted a father. I walked out. I heard Randall's chair scrape back. Keith called my name. I didn't turn around. I drove home to my new apartment and sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, the good kind, the kind Inez would have picked. I sat there for a long time thinking. The next morning, I called Murray's lawyers and told them what I wanted to do. I wanted to create a foundation, the Virgil Kimball Foundation. Its purpose would be to help elderly people who had been abandoned or displaced by their families, housing assistance, meal programs, legal aid for seniors being exploited by their own relatives, medical support, but above all, dignity, because I knew from experience that losing your dignity destroyed you faster than losing your money. I kept enough to live on. A comfortable apartment, not extravagant. Good food. A reliable car. Enough to travel a little. To see the places Inez and I always talked about visiting. She wanted to see the Grand Canyon. I went last spring and stood on the south rim at sunset and cried my eyes out because she wasn't there. But I went. The foundation opened its first office in June. We helped 9 people in the first month. By December, that number was 43. Every one of them had a story like mine. A 71-year-old woman whose daughter moved her into a garage, an 80-year-old veteran whose grandson stole his pension checks, a 69-year-old man who slept in his car for 3 months after his kids changed the locks. When you hear enough of these stories, you understand that this isn't rare. It's an epidemic that nobody talks about. I think about my father every single day. He died thinking he had nothing to show for his life. No house, no savings, no legacy. But he was wrong. That $12,000, given on faith to a stranger in a bar, rippled forward through 53 years and landed exactly where it was needed. It saved me. And now, through the foundation, it's saving others. I think about Murray too. He's still alive, though he's slowing down. I visit him on Sundays. We drink coffee together and talk about our fathers, about promises, about what it means to keep your word when nobody is watching and nobody would blame you for forgetting. My father never forgot his promise either, in a way. He promised himself he'd live with integrity. He did. He promised himself he'd help people when he could. He did. He just never got to see how far that kindness traveled. As for my sons, Randall has not spoken to me since that dinner. Keith sent a card on my birthday. Just a card, nothing else. No phone call, no visit. It said, "Thinking of you, Dad." I put it on my refrigerator and looked at it for a long time. I'm not sure what to make of it. Maybe it's a beginning. Maybe it's just guilt. I guess time will tell. Some nights I still talk to Inez's photograph. I tell her about the foundation, about the people we're helping, about the old man at the hardware store who changed everything. I tell her I think her biscuits were the best thing I ever tasted, and that I still can't hum that hymn right. I tell her I miss her in a way that doesn't get smaller. It just gets quieter. I used to think the worst thing that could happen to a man was losing everything. But I was wrong. The worst thing is learning who people really are. And the best thing, the thing that saves you, is discovering that somewhere out there, a promise kept in the dark is still waiting to find its way home. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this one. Thank you for your kindness. I'll be reading every single comment. And if you look on the screen right now, you'll see 2 more true life stories that I really think you'll love. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. With love and respect.